Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Monday, September 9th, 2024. Time for another week O shows. This week ending in Friday the 13th, which should be, pretty spectacular and lucky for various reasons. So today, of course, we'll be setting up ladders for people to walk under. Just getting ready. I don't want you to be caught by surprise by Friday the 13th. I say get all that stuff out of the way now. Cross the path of black cats or cause them to cross your path. I don't know if it works the other way or not. Whether anyone can tell, or whether it's all relative and the cats consider us to be crossing their paths. This could be true. What's the big news of the weekend? I don't know. Not my job. That's Greg Dworkin's job. But I can give you take a stab at it. I don't know. Is the answer. There was so many things. It wasn't, like an outrageous news weekend or anything. But where do you draw the line? What's the most important thing? I don't know. I guess probably the biggest news that just hasn't really gotten a great deal of attention, but you probably heard about it on Friday afternoon. It screwed up our morning posts, right? The judge in the New York case in which Donald Trump, who's, by the way, nominated for president of the United States by the Republican Party, one of the two major parties in this country, convicted on 34 counts not all that long ago. I think we're like 15 weeks out from his conviction. But has he been sentenced? No. His sentencing has been now twice delayed. Why? Reasons. So there you have it. His sentencing once rescheduled for September 18th. That is to say a week from this Wednesday. Wednesday, has been rescheduled again, this time to, I think, November 26th, at which point they'll probably reschedule it because of Thanksgiving or being in near proximity to Thanksgiving, or maybe Trump wants to go up to New England and view the colors of the leaves, although I think it's a little bit late for this. So maybe he wants to go south for it. I don't know. No, maybe he wants to play golf near Pervo-Lago, and we just can't get in the way of that. Apparently, in this country, you can't do justice-related things. Nothing in the criminal justice system can function in a year in which you're more than a year away from an election or not. I'm not certain what the line is supposed to be. I mean, it went as far out as you can't confirm a Supreme Court justice nomination in an election year once. Remember, that was one of the rules. And the DOJ has got guidelines about these things. But, of course, this was a New York case, a state case. The Department of Justice wasn't involved in all this. But I assume they try to model themselves after the Federal Department of Justice in that way. But it is interesting that, for instance, down in Texas and in Florida, it's perfectly good time to start kicking people's doors in because they're suspected of perhaps registering people to vote, as was the case in Texas, or that they are, what was the problem in Florida? Oh, yes, right. Did you sign a petition to put an abortion rights constitutional amendment on the ballot? How do we know this? We're going to have to kick your door down and double, triple, quadruple check. And possibly, even if you did sign it, maybe just ruin your day, your life. Check to see whether there's any outstanding warrants, search your home for drugs, what have you. All fun things that are going on, all of which, of course, involve the criminal justice system. I was told, of course, that you can't do that within so many years of an election, but I guess it's okay if you're a Republican. The guy has already been convicted. There's no chance of biasing voters against him by convicting him. He's been convicted. Sentence him. And, of course, you'll also remember, as you keep in mind as November approaches and as early voting approaches, please go and bank your votes early. I would remind you that justice itself and the execution of justice itself is on the ballot. If you believe that people who have been convicted of 34 counts of crimes should be sentenced for their crimes, whether it's probation, suspended sentence, jail time, fines, what have you, if you think that sentencing should follow conviction, well, you can't vote for Donald Trump because if Donald Trump wins, there won't be any sentencing. So that's the end of that, and I hope you realize it and vote accordingly. So was that the biggest story? I don't know. We can read the background about it. We'll talk about it a little bit. It puts a dent in our plans to play liberal thinking's musings on the sentencing in the few days leading up to that sentencing, because now there's more days leading up to that sentencing than there ever were before. So we'll have to wait a little bit. Perhaps we'll delay things and restart that series sometime in mid-October, if I can remember. I have a little Post-it note up here to try to remind myself. So then the next question is whether that's the biggest story of the weekend, or is it Donald Trump finally beginning to campaign openly on ethnic cleansing in the United States under the Mencius Moldbug Curtis Yarvin theory that if you say it out loud during the campaign and then win, it's legal. So try that. That's a possibility. He has as much as admitted that his gigantic deportation, mass deportations now signs, you remember from the convention, they were waving those signs, that mass deportation will be a bloody event, as it turns out. And wow, bloodier even than his nicking his ear while shaving / standing near a bullet that passed by him, or something like that. Well, let's let Greg in on the conversation to try and decide what might be the leading story coming out of the weekend. He is here to join us all the way from sunny Connecticut. Good morning, Greg.
Hey, good morning. So it's a fall day in Connecticut, not so sunny, a little overcast, but still lovely. One of those lovely days because this is the best time of year.
Yeah, okay. People are getting ready to be angry about there being Halloween candy on the shelves. That's true.
That's and excellent. Also, we're waiting for the Halloween candy conspiracies. I don't know what this year's is, but that's always an event that you have to wait.
I think it's
I'm not into pumpkin spice, so I'm not looking forward to that.
I think Halloween candy is suspected of voting illegally. All those Kit Kats are going to the polls to vote for Democrats. Plus, they're of course Mexican.
As far as Judge Marchand goes, I'm just as happy. I mean, he was caught between a rock and a hard place. Whatever he does is going to be criticized. But I'm just as happy.
I would like to have criticized the sentence
after the election, because I don't want to give any ammunition to the martyr contingent that votes for Trump because everybody's against him. Look at this, and then the other side of that.
Well, 12 people are against him anyway.
Well, but if Marchand decided that he should go to jail, as he should, even for a short period of time.
Very short period of time.
Then
2 weeks.
The Supreme Court would get involved because
Maybe.
It's none of their business, but they would anyway because that's who they are, and I don't trust them. So I'm just as happy to have it after the election.
Well,
then when he
plays
loses,
into
he can go
the
to jail.
and
it's
fine.
They can get involved, and everybody can talk about it, and so what?
I guess that's a way too, right? The field can be reversed on this thing, and you go and you tell people, look, if you think that people who get convicted of crime should be sentenced, you better vote that way, because the voting for Trump means that doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, but
unless
people
it's you.
Don't vote that way, and so that's one of the main things we're going to wind up talking about.
Well,
because, in fact,
come with me.
The biggest story of the weekend was the New York Times Siena poll. And you may not think so, but the entire political and journalistic world thought it was.
That's true. Well, I don't like those guys, so I wasn't paying but I did see that, and I saw that they were all going crazy. Oh, my God. We did a poll, and it wasn't particularly good. And it means something that it doesn't. So, all right. Big story. But they did interview more people than the Heritage Foundation did about their big immigration story. I'll get to that later.
Well, basically, the New York Times Siena poll has a Republican lean. Maybe some people have estimated, many people have said, it's about R+3.
Many people are saying this.
Many people are saying this. And in fact, according to other polls, like all of the other polls, plus the actual real-life Washington state primary, which is very predictive of the political environment, it's probably closer to a D+3 or D+4 world. And so that's why the New York Times Siena poll is a little nuts compared to the others, always has been, and yet it hasn't changed. That's what's so interesting. The last time they did this poll, Trump was up by 1. Now he's up by 1. And oh my gosh, everybody went nuts about this, and for no good reason.
Oh.
but everybody went nuts about it.
Well,
so what's interesting is that Nate Cohen had an explainer this morning.
Okay.
And he wrote a newsletter, State of the Race, a dead heat with 8 weeks to go. All the polls show that it's a dead heat, but that's not what he concentrated on. What he said is with the polls showing such a close race in so many key states, it would take only a small, typical, ordinary polling error to put one candidate well over the top.
Oh.
Imagine what would happen if this year's polls were off in exactly the same ways as they were off in 2020 or 2022.
Well,
if they were off the
it
same
would be
ways
like that.
in 2022, it's still a Harris win. But if they were off the way they were in 2020, it's a +2 Trump win. And 2020 is probably the best example of Trump running behind ahead of what his polls said. However, what the polls also showed in 2024 is that he's running behind his polls because he always did worse in his primaries because of those Harris vote, because of those Haley voters.
Pelosi.
Haley voters. Pelosi voters.
Yeah.
And in fact, he did worse in many of the primaries than the polls suggest. So the other part that's important to know about the New York Times Siena poll, an excellent poll, but consistent in that they always have a Republican lean, is that they do their polling based on voter rolls. It's a specific method of polling. It's called RBS, registration-based sampling. Contrast that with random digital dialing polls. That's the way it used to be. You got the phone book, remember phone books? And then you used to call people on landlines, remember landlines? And then you would randomize who you called, and then you'd get your polling done. That's the way polling was done for years and years and years until people stopped using landlines and they got caller ID and they stopped answering poll questions.
They got tired of cranking those phones, those wall-mounted things.
Calls. Right? So RBS polling, like New York Times Siena, relies on contacting people who are on the voting rolls.
All right.
Okay.
I mean,
that means
seems semi-sensible.
The huge surge in registration that Tom Bonnier has picked up. Bonner has picked up in enthusiasm and younger voters signing up in droves, like over 200% compared to where they were, and over 200% compared to where they were in 2020. None of that's picked up by New York Times Siena polling because they're not on the rolls.
Right.
So they undercount those people. So my point is that rather than undercount Trump voters this year, they may be undercounting Harris voters. And that's where the polling error may come in. We'll see. Obviously, we won't know for another less than 2 months. But entirely possible and just as plausible as any other explanation for why polls like Siena are Republican-leaning. They're just not picking up younger voters who were very enthusiastic for Harris, which we know.
Good. Well, we'll be able to tell when they all go to vote early and sales of avocado toast drops.
Yeah, well, let me give you an example. Sahil Kapoor looks at the New York Times poll.
This will really work, yeah.
And he says, New York Times poll shows Harris seriously underperforming Biden 2020 with key demos. Black voters, Harris 78, Trump 14. Biden had 92. Latinos, Harris 55, Trump 41. In 2020, it was Biden 59, Trump 38. Voters under 30, and this is the one that, you raise your eyebrows at.
No one knows.
Harris 51, Trump 43, but it was Biden 59, Trump 35. So keep in mind that those are relatively low numbers for Harris, which, frankly, I don't believe, but that's what it is. All right, let me contrast this, for example, with today's poll, which comes out from Washington Post, Ipsos. More black Americans are certain to vote for Harris, post-Ipsos poll finds. The shift is concentrated among younger black Americans, especially younger women.
Okay. I mean, that makes some sense, yeah.
Where are the numbers? Let's see if we can find the numbers within this. 69% say they're absolutely certain to vote in November, up from 62, still lower than 74% in June 2020, but that increase is important for Harris as she tries to rebuild the multicultural coalition that put Obama in office in 2008 and Biden in 2020. It also mirrors other polls, except New York Times, I added that, showing that she's gained ground among black voters in the last 2 months. New York Times doesn't show that. Her gains have been more pronounced among black Americans than the general public. New York Times doesn't show that. But she's also been getting growing support from Americans writ large. New York Times doesn't show that. The increased engagement among a critical Democratic constituency is concentrated among younger black Americans, especially younger women who were less enthusiastic about voting this spring. The share of black people under 30 saying they're certain to vote is up 15% from April, and among black women under 40, turnout interest is up 18 points since April. And turnout interest among younger black men also rose for 8 points.
Yes. Well,
right. You know. So they're showing stuff that the New York Times poll isn't picking up. And that's why that maybe there's an error one way or the other is important. If you believe that historically Trump is underrepresented in the polls and, maybe historically based on N equal 2, I think that's old news. I think those voters already understand what's going on, and pollsters have adjusted. But if you believe that, then you're Doug Shane.
Oh, well,
and you're going to write a piece in the Hill that says Harris is up, but Trump might be stronger.
Well, sure. Kennedy
Why?
might be
Because
stronger.
the polls always underestimate Trump. And also, Obama should step down for the good of the country and not run for a second term.
Good news for John McCain.
That's Doug Shane.
Yeah. All right. Well,
okay, so I felt better.
That sounds unlikely
because I said, well, if Shane thinks that Trump's ahead, that means Harris is ahead.
I guess so. Trump thinks Trump's ahead. Wrong. That's not nearly any more likely. But okay, I see where they're going with it. I see what got people upset about it. And people are, of course, already primed to be upset with the New York Times anyway. But now you have some scientific understanding of what might irritate you about their polling in particular.
Right. But none of it matters.
Oh.
What matters is that there's a debate tomorrow night.
Right. That was another thing.
Some people will watch it. I would expect it would get more viewership than normal because this isn't the normal year.
I might watch some. I don't know.
Yeah. See? And,
that's not
generally
normal.
Speaking, debates don't matter, but the first one this year did, and this one might too.
This is the first one, sort of, really, anyway.
It's the first one for her.
Yeah, right. The other guy I don't care about anyway.
Actual ticket.
Right, true.
But there's no question that the debate with Biden and Trump had a profound influence on the election. Nobody can argue that.
It did. By the way, that should not have been allowed. It could impact the outcome of an election. You can't have that happening during an election year.
Well, you can't have it right before the election.
Right. So I wanted to just let everybody know. I'm going to be proposing a constitutional amendment that you cannot do anything that would impact the outcome of an election in an election year, just so everything is fair now. You just
got to be fair.
They're going to just give you candidates picked out of a hat. They won't even tell you who they are. Just go vote. And
right. And these are all, polling at this particular point in time is all tea leaves and entrails and
I don't like how it could affect the outcome of an election. That's bad.
Throwing the dice.
Right. Oh, by the way, no announcing the results of your polls in an election year either.
Certainly. So, this is from
I can't tell you because it would affect the outcome of
a Jewish
Democratic
organization.
Right.
So, definitely a political bias. Nonetheless, September 2024 national poll of Jewish voters. Key findings, Jewish voters very positive toward Harris. In a head-to-head matchup, Harris leads Trump by 72-25. An improvement from Biden's 67-26. Harris has a net plus 13-point higher favorability rating than Biden did. Plus 38 versus plus 25.
Okay.
Trump and the Republican Party continue to be deeply unpopular with Jewish voters. 76% unfavorable of Trump, 73% unfavorable of Vance. Now remember, Trump is a convicted felon who tried to overthrow the government.
And that is a bad thing.
So that's why he gets 76% unfavorable. J.D. Vance is like just a touch away from that at 73. I just think that's remarkable.
Just grimy and we don't like him. Sure.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Also untested and weird.
Republican Party, 76% unfavorable. And the future of democracy is the most important issue determining how Jews will vote, 44%, followed by abortion, 28%, and the economy, 24%. Now, that's really interesting because that's basically how Daily Kos voters look at this.
Oh.
That's how
Daily
Daily Kos voters, who are certainly center-left, not the far left, but center-left,
okay,
look at this and say, okay, I don't like it. I have a long memory, big tent and all that. Hold my nose. I get it. Dick Cheney is voting for Harris.
Yeah.
Along with Liz Cheney.
Yep.
Dick Cheney.
Yeah, the new Cheney guy.
Shoot him in the face Republican conservatism.
Well, yeah.
Is voting for Harris. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
At least until the election.
I don't know how you're not, I know there were some people who I guess are, I don't know, I would say professionally, except it's not professional, but professionally upset with this. It's okay. Your vote is still, it's still pure.
Can I just say something that you're going to have to censor out?
You could try. Go ahead.
All right.
Yeah.
If Henry Kissinger was still alive.
Yeah.
Henry Kissinger.
Oh,
and
my
he
goodness,
said that he was going to vote for Kamala Harris, I would take his vote.
Yeah. I mean, you have to. First of all, you have no choice. But yeah, I mean, look, it doesn't say anything about your vote. I know it's funny. I'm voting for the same person as this horrible. But so what? If I told you tomorrow, how about if I tell you right now, Dick Cheney likes your favorite flavor of ice cream. Are you giving it up? No, it would be ridiculous. It's stupid. It has nothing to do with me. Yeah, that's right. There's nothing to be afraid of. He's voting for Kamala Harris. Terrific. Wonderful. To the extent it changes anyone's mind to vote for her, fantastic. We'll take it. I don't understand. There are people who are like really upset to find out they're voting for the same person. There's only two people running.
Right. This same poll, by the way, expresses strong opposition to Benjamin Netanyahu, 30% favorable, 63% unfavorable, and believe that somebody can be both pro-Israel and critical of Netanyahu's government, 92%. So that's basically where American Jews stand according to this poll. And so there's a lot of undercurrents here. What I'm saying is that if you're trying to rebuild the Obama or Biden coalition, Harris is making great strides in doing that.
Yes.
And, again, not picked up by the New York Times polling, but there's certainly a shift going on under the hood. And I just don't think that they're picking it up. But if you want to look and this sometimes comes up for discussion. I have to say sometimes annoys you because too much of it is done.
Yard signs. It's not yard signs? Okay.
No. We're not doing yard signs, which aren't really as Trumpy as they used to be, which is, I guess, good.
Yeah.
It's a measure of enthusiasm.
Sure. Right. They do vote.
No, we're talking about why do people even consider voting for Trump? How could that be? Because, shouldn't it be 100-0?
Yes, I believe that as well.
And what I'm saying about that polling of American Jews is they put democracy first, and non-college voters do not put democracy first. They put the economy first. And I just want to illustrate that with a couple of articles here. This one is from the Detroit News, and it's looking at Michigan, and it's using a pollster who found a 1-point lead for Trump a month ago.
Okay.
So it's going to lean a little bit conservative just the way that the New York Times poll does. This is a Lansing polling firm, Glengarriff Group, and they found Trump has a 1.2 lead, which is well within the margin of error and essentially a tie vote. And I have to add, Michigan polling isn't like Iowa polling or Wisconsin polling where you have specific in-house pollsters, or even Pennsylvania polling, where you can say, okay, well, that pollster's really good. If that's what they say, that's probably what's going on. If Ann Seltzer tells me how Iowa's voting, I have a pretty good idea how they're going to vote. And the same thing with Charles Franklin's Marquette University law poll in Wisconsin. And you can say the same for Susquehanna, Franklin and Marshall, Muhlenberg, some of the in-house Pennsylvania polling that we haven't seen yet since the Democratic convention, so we don't really know what's going on with Pennsylvania. There's the polling there. Michigan doesn't have that kind of reliable polling. Michigan is always off by like 10 points, so,
Okay.
It's New Hampshire polling. New Hampshire and Michigan, Nevada, Alaska. There are states that are just really difficult to poll for different technical reasons between them.
They don't like phones.
Well, that's true in Alaska where people are hard to reach. They're sort of out there.
Yeah, no signal. No signal, no survey.
In New Hampshire, where everybody is part of the New Hampshire House.
Yeah.
They're busy. The polling isn't always great for whatever reason. Michigan, I don't know why the polling isn't good, but it just isn't. In any case, they did this.
They're at the football games?
Conservative polling found basically a tie, and then they went and interviewed some of the people who were voting for Trump to find out why, and they find that non-college people are really unhappy if they're on fixed income with the price of things. Right. And that's basically why they're considering it. Yeah. And one person, said, the only reason I would think about voting for Harris is she's a woman, and I'm a woman. Okay. 1 in 3 women without a college degree who participated in the poll said they're most concerned about the price of food, medicine, and rent. Democracy was not number one, is my point. Yeah. Another 23% said they're worried about having enough money to set aside for retirement.
I'm worried about that.
This is interesting. This polling suggests this block of female voters is less motivated this year by the fight to preserve abortion rights because Michigan already did.
That's interesting, too. Yeah.
It's fascinating. And so the job of the Michigan Democratic Party is to go back and tell them, hey, if there's a national ban, protecting it in Michigan isn't going to help you.
True.
And so that's because these voters don't know that.
Oh. A lot of people would probably be caught by surprise by that. Yeah. Well, okay, that would be a good reminder. Of course, you could do it. I mean, Republicans very frequently ask people to vote again for something that was already illegal or whatever. Let's make it even more illegal. So I suppose you could do that. But, yeah, interesting twist on getting that job done on the early side. That people think it's over with and I don't have to think about that anymore. I can think about the economy. Stupid.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. That was a long break. It did seem like a long break. It was the same size as always, but when you're sitting there saying, are we back yet? What's happening?
No, it's only 9:28.
I need to tell you why the Siena poll is terrible.
Is it 9:29 yet? No, it's still 9:28.
All right. Well, now we're back. What was the big
so
itch?
I want to tell you about Lafayette Cates. This is from the Washington Post story about their Ipsos poll finding increased enthusiasm for Harris.
Yeah,
so that's the overall picture. But they do pick out a black Trump voter. And I'm always fascinated by that. And
was it my black
let me
guy,
do my own
what
interpretation.
Did he say? Yeah.
What they say, Lafayette Cates, 42, a software engineer from Philadelphia, said he voted for Trump in 2020 and plans to do so this year.
All right.
Okay, get the reason.
Software.
He feels that Harris doesn't fully understand the needs of black Americans who are descendants of enslaved people. Harris's father was born in Jamaica. Her mother was from India. She doesn't come from a background similar to the majority of black Americans. I don't think she can be an effective leader. She doesn't face what the majority of African Americans face. Okay? And you read that and you say, wait a minute, Trump's father deliberately discriminated in housing against black people. And younger Donald Trump, as he picked up his dad's business, continued to do the same.
Yeah.
Central Park 5 declaring they were all guilty and they should die. even though they were innocent and exonerated. They're now the exonerated 5.
Sure.
How do you ignore all of that?
Oh, he doesn't.
How do you ignore all of that and say, well, somehow or other, Harris doesn't understand the needs of black Americans, but I'm voting for Trump because he does? How do you say that?
He says that Harris doesn't understand the experience of prejudice against black Americans, and Trump understands that very, very well.
That's what he says.
Oh.
And I read that and I'm thinking to myself,
but I mean,
okay, here's a guy
does.
who won't vote for a black woman.
That's probably true. But Trump does understand the history of prejudice against black people. He's been writing that history the whole time. That's what I mean. It's like, my father told me exactly how to discriminate against them, and that's what I've been doing. What do you mean I don't understand discrimination against black people?
And if you're voting
I'm doing
against
it myself
her because she doesn't understand it, you absolutely can vote for me because I do, and I have proven it.
Look, there's obviously no reasoning with the guy. He's busy with software. He does not reading history books or anything.
But that's the point. You have to step back and look at some of the, how is it possible that Trump is getting as many votes as he eventually will? Because it's not going to be 0, and anything above 0 is like, how can he get above 0? And the answer is people make up their mind for reasons, and then when you ask them about it, they just make stuff up.
Yes.
Why am I voting for Trump? Because I feel like it. Well, but why aren't you voting for Harris? Well, let me tell you, she's not a leader. She doesn't have enough experience.
Why don't they want to just say that?
She's been vice president for the past 4 years. She was prosecuted. She was a senator. She has more experience than outside of George H.W. Bush, just about anybody who ran for president.
It's insane.
Yeah, but she doesn't have enough experience. What does that mean? It means I'm not voting for a black woman is what it means.
Why won't you just say it, though? I mean, Trump has given you permission to say exactly that. If you feel like it, I hate women, so go ahead. Say it. I mean, I don't really know why the need for an excuse. Not sure. He feels bad about it. Maybe there are black women probably in his life, and
I don't think she
would punish him for it.
What does that mean?
No. I mean, none of it makes any sense. She doesn't understand the African American experience because her father's Jamaican. How did black people get to Jamaica?
Here, let me give you a pro tip.
I wonder. Yeah.
When people tell you, I want to hear more about their policies, they don't really want to hear more about their policies.
Well, that's clearly true. It wouldn't surprise me if he was just plain, I don't like the idea of a woman president. Maybe I don't like black woman president, maybe any woman president. There's certainly that possibility. He's a software engineer. There aren't any women around him, probably.
This is a media trope.
They love to make sure that
what
they
you
fire
do
all
is
their
you
women.
find a poll, says stuff, 80% this, 20% that, and they feel obligated to have one comment from the 80% and one comment from the 20%.
Right, fair and balanced.
Okay, fair and balanced. And when it comes to climate change, John Oliver had the classic 99 to 1, and here's the 99 and here's the 1, and so that's fair and balanced. When you talk about the, objective reporting. But it's a trope. You have to do that. I don't know why you have to do that, but they feel like they have to do that. What they should do, if it's 80-20, is they should have 4, people who are voting for Harris comment and one person who's voting
that's not a bad idea.
That would be much more fair and balanced. But that would give you the idea that more people are for Harris. We can't do that. We have to be fair and balanced.
I notice that the New York Times never quotes somebody who will deny the existence of the New York Times in any of their things. And I mean, there are such people. There's probably one, and they ought to be represented in there. And I'd like to be that person.
The point I'm trying to make here is that the individual comments from individual people are extremely unhelpful. They've never been helpful. They don't give you insight. They don't tell you anything. All they tell you is, I've already made up my mind for other reasons than I'm telling the person who's doing the interview, but they're going to print it and it'll, they'll probably clean it up the way they clean up Trump. And so it'll make it sound like I have a coherent philosophy in deciding but that's not what I told them. That's not how I sounded. That's why listening to focus groups is just so much more interesting than reading these interviews of individual voters.
Yeah.
It's the same individual voters, but you hear them raw. And when you hear them and when you hear them interact with the person asking the questions and with the other people in the room, you get a sense of where they're coming from.
Okay.
This is just garbage.
Well, he got in the paper. That's exciting for him, I'm sure.
Right. More polling, which I think is of interest. This was September 4th, but I haven't been on for a while. So this is in the Hill.
All right.
tops Harris among veterans.
All right.
But
Probably
of interest.
Expected. Yes.
A survey from Change Research shared with The Hill on Wednesday found Trump is leading Harris 51-41 among veterans, 49-44 among active duty. The margin was smaller among family members, 47-45. Okay. Pollsters noted the support for Trump from veterans, active duty members, and their family members have all dropped. They say slightly, but some have significantly dropped since the 2016 election, shrinking the former president's margins among each of these groups by at least 9 points.
All right.
They call that slight drop. I'll take that slight drop.
Yeah, 9. Okay.
Trump won veterans by 19 points in 2016, only 10 now. His lead among active service members dropped from 19 to 5.
Well, all
and
right.
12 points to 2 with family members.
Oh,
those who voted for Trump at least once but do not plan to, they're the only ones that I'm interested in. Or asked to explain their choice, 53% said his comments, attitudes, and policies towards veterans and service members were part of the decision.
They heard it.
So may I point out this whole Arlington thing did not help him.
No, this will
and
make it worse.
And they mentioned that in the article.
And it won't be in the polls yet. So that's interesting too. Even though it did happen several weeks ago, I don't think it'll be quite.
They spend the whole second half of the article talking about Arlington, in fact. And so, yes, it has a difference. And I want to contrast that, or at least add to that, with this one just
Trump
published this morning from Axios. And it's not a poll, but it's interesting. Scoop: generals come to Harris's defense on Afghanistan.
Okay.
Why it matters. The withdrawal has emerged as a major campaign issue. The push to defend Harris comes from retired military brass, including 3 with 4 stars. Some of the military officials are also fanning out on TV this week to defend Harris's records.
All right.
So I think that's also interesting. So on the one hand, the support for Trump from veterans has dropped. Arlington National Cemetery fiasco is part of it. I think Jimmy McCain's endorsement of Harris will make a difference to this group, just as Cheney endorsement makes a difference to certain old-style Republicans, old guard Republicans.
Yeah.
So I think it all matters. Is that being picked up by the polls? Not yet.
No. All right. Well, I mean, it takes a while, and of course, then they poll a little while after that, and then it takes them a little while to run the numbers. So like 2 weeks.
Well, basically, we have the debate tomorrow night.
No, we'll have to wait 2 weeks.
Then pollsters go in the field immediately after.
What'd you think?
And then we find out over the weekend. So I think the most important and significant polling so far for this election is really going to be happening Saturday, Sunday. We'll find out a little bit about what all this is about. We'll have a preview of it if you actually watch the debate. But in terms of whether it makes a difference, we'll find out by the weekend that comes.
So what we're saying is answer unidentified calls this week.
Yes.
After Tuesday.
And if you don't like it, hang up.
Yeah, right. If they're trying to sell you something or it's a robocall,
say, excuse me, my house is on fire, and just hang up.
Yeah, remember, you don't have to be polite to them, but if it's a pollster, you tell them you're voting for Kennedy.
Use this as an opportunity. Right. Every crisis is an opportunity. So if you get those calls saying, oh, thank you for calling, please take me off your list.
True. You could yell at them if you want to. They're, generally speaking, though, low-paid workers who don't really want to be calling you anyway.
Yeah, or you could just yell at them and say, take me off your list. However you want to do it. Everybody's different.
Right. Oh, you know what? Practice your Tim Walz. Pretend you're Tim Walz wanting to be taken off the list. Do it that way, and they'll appreciate it. He'll be very nice.
Now, the New York Times spent so much time on
list?
polling because it was the big story. They didn't have time for what the Washington Post had time for. Trump pledges to jail opponents, baselessly suggesting election will be stolen from him.
Right.
And then the subheadline is the former president's latest threats made in a social media post represent the most overt signal yet. He will not accept the results in November if he loses. That's the way the Post handled it. Excellent.
Yeah.
It's about as good as you can get.
I mean, that's still sanitized.
But that's all right.
Yeah.
But the Times didn't even have it in their front page.
Right. Trump messages consistently on strongness. They don't even mention it. All right.
Well, let me give you the screenshot here.
Oh, all right.
And you can see what I'm talking about. Open it up and you'll see, where is it?
Where is it? Okay, well, let me see. Yeah. There was something else someone was
polling.
commenting on.
We're going to talk about polling. And then we have another story. Let's talk about polling. And then we have Harris and Trump will address abortion rights at the debate.
What else was missing?
And then ABC News is under a microscope. I mean, where's the story about Trump threatening people?
Yes.
It's not there.
Well, we at the Times do not read Truth Social, except
Axios had it. Let me give
Why
it.
Does it
since
matter?
Axios had the exact Truth Social post. Cease and desist, it says from Donald Trump. I, together with many attorneys and legal scholars, am watching the sanctity of the 2024 presidential election very closely because I know better than most the rampant cheating and skullduggery.
Where did he learn that?
Well, Stephen Miller wrote this, but that's the point.
And
that
he
has
is
taken place by the Democrats in the 2020 presidential election. And the important point is certain of these words are capitalized as if it were in German.
I've never heard that point made that way. Yeah, that's a good one.
But look at it. It was a disgrace to our nation. Therefore, the 2024 election, where votes have just started being cast, will be under the closest professional scrutiny. When I win, these people that cheated will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. So this depravity of justice does not happen again.
Holy smokes.
We cannot let our country further devolve into a third world nation, and we won't. Please beware that this legal exposure extends to lawyers, political operatives, donors, illegal voters, corrupt election officials. Those involved in unscrupulous behavior will be sought out, caught, and prosecuted at levels unfortunately never before seen in our country.
We should be doing this in Hitler voice, much less the Trump voice, that shouty speech-giving voice that he has. You know what? That's not a bad idea. I need a bot that will scrape his social media posts and reprint them verbatim in English, but in that German Gothic lettering that they used to use in the war period for their public proclamations, just to give it that tinge. Imagine it being screamed in Hitler voice.
Well,
now it starts to make sense.
I'm sending you my pinned tweet from 2016.
Yes.
Which is a homage to Molly Ivins, of course, who originally said it about Pat Buchanan.
Yes.
But a Trump speech in 4 words is better in the original German.
Yeah. And that's kind of how it's coming across. And it does explain all that weird capitalization. So, yeah, okay. Wow. They're pretty wacky. Just saying.
So, one needs to be aware of that. Yes. And yes, that's a big story. And yes, it's important.
Yeah.
And the Bulwark, Dennis Aftergood has an interesting point here.
Mm-hmm.
About a corollary.
Mm-hmm.
You may recall that Trump has promised to pardon all the January 6th insurrectionists.
Yes, but don't forget that if you are one of them, that means you won't get squat. But all right, yeah, he has promised that. He's terrible at promises.
Yeah, I get that. But the point is, why would he even suggest that? Because these are the troops he wants out in the street taking retribution. This is his private army. And that goes along with that post that I read to you with the capital letters.
Yeah.
All right. So it's all part and parcel of the same thing. I need these people because they're my brown shirts and they didn't go break some windows.
Yeah. He won't care and he won't believe me, but I just want to point out that, I will point out that some of them are almost certainly aware of the fact that they have been rotting in jail because of him. But I don't know whether they're going to care or not. But I mean, I point that out just because a couple of weeks ago, somebody shot at him.
Mm-hmm.
So just so that it's out there, there may be some angry people who are being released and aren't as grateful as Trump thinks that they should be. And that's really a major driver in his life, is the number of ingrates who turn out not to love him the way he should be loved. And not that I want him to learn that lesson, but I also don't want those people to get out and get pardons.
Right.
Okay.
So anyway, that's a story.
Yeah.
Now, if you want, because the other big story outside of the New York Times Siena polls and what the polls are actually saying are advice to Harris.
Yes.
That she doesn't need.
Right. But if we were chatting
about...
You want to hear something?
What she needs to do about the debate.
Definitely doesn't want to hear this now. But
right?
yeah.
And people
right.
wrote an awful lot about that. Some is interesting,
Sure.
some is not.
I say you should win it. That is my advice to you.
Let's start with The Economist. They have a couple of pieces. This is all in the pundit roundup. Our Rafto stories was getting too long, so I didn't, publish everything. But if you go to the pundit roundup, here's the first one from The Economist. Will the debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump matter? Normally, presidential matchups hardly move the needle. This is no ordinary year.
Well, Axios right for why it matters if they...
why it matters. This election is different. Miss Harris became the Democratic Party's champion very late in the race. She's already well known to those who follow politics closely, not only from her 4 years as vice president, but also from her time as a senator, her unsuccessful bid for the Democratic nomination, the inexperienced one.
Right, yes.
But many Americans are still getting to know her. Research suggests that voters gain the most from debates when they know less about the candidates. So she has a lot to gain from this debate, and that's important.
Yeah, good.
By the way, I have to throw in this one. There's a poster on Twitter named JP, handle is Dirt Road Pickup. And he writes, as a conservative voting for Harris, as somebody asked me what policies of hers I actually liked. He said, well, I like the one where she didn't call to terminate the Constitution to overturn an election. Her own legal team reportedly told her she'd lost. Mainly that one.
Right. That's a good one. And he doesn't even need the legal team to tell him he lost. He knows, and he has said so.
He admitted it. Last week he said, I lost by a hair.
Yeah, a hair. I've seen your hair, and that's quite a margin.
But that got a lot of right-wing folks just as upset as his flip-flop on abortion did.
I love it. It was good.
All of that matters.
But
this matters in terms of enthusiasm.
That's true, and I can even help you with that. But
enthusiasm.
That's why I say that there's guys in jail who just read, I'm in jail for nothing, and have guns.
Yes.
And have seen people shoot him. And now there's a permission structure. Sorry, I don't make the rules. I would not give you permission to do that. It's just, you're different from me, and I understand that.
Yeah. This other one from The Economist is a little more interesting. The Harris-Trump debate will be a clash of speaking styles. And I don't know who Johnson is, but Johnson, our language columnist,
that's the way
assesses their effectiveness charts. I just found that.
Yeah, clash in speaking styles. My goodness. I mean, I don't know why my brain just went to... You remember the old Clint Eastwood movie, what was it, Any Which Way But Loose? Co-stars with a guy with a contrasting speaking style, as I recall. It was an orangutan, but, they're contrast in speaking, like one flings poo, and the other has policy positions.
Well, I don't know if it was that one or the original, Every Which Way, whatever, but, it was an East Coast, West Coast thing.
Yeah, oh, okay. Maybe that was the big difference.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
the East Coast fighter versus the West Coast fighter. The one where his arm got hurt and he still beat him one-handed.
Oh, man. All right. There's lots of contrasting
as Clint Eastwood movies
styles.
go, that's one of the better ones. But in any case, East Coast, West Coast is always a thing. So Johnson, our language columnist, says Ms. Harris is the more considered speaker in her one-on-one debate in 2020 with Mike Pence. She uttered about 17% fewer words than Pence, despite speaking for almost exactly the same amount of time. Was that the one where was also one less fly?
Yes, I think so. I was just thinking about that one. It could have been the fly talking.
It was funny because, people think of that debate, they think about the fly, but this guy says, no, she uttered 17% fewer words. How could you not remember that about the debate?
Yeah,
it's one of the many things I found droll about this particular piece.
Wow, holy cow. Yeah, right. That's a Mark Knoller observation for you.
Right. Yeah. She carefully controlled his interruptions with Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. When she had the floor, she often seemed to be back in her old job as prosecutor, methodically making her case. And the variety of the vocabulary differs, too. By Mr. Lieberman's calculations, Mr. Trump uses unusually few distinct, that is to say, different words.
Strongly.
Fewer and bigly. Fewer, in fact, than almost any other public figure. In the debates in 2020, it took Trump about 6,000 words to use 1,000 distinct words. Mr. Biden, Ms. Harris, and Mr. Pence reached that mark in just 4,000 words.
I think I see what that means.
So, Mr. Trump's, so their vocabulary is much bigger.
Yeah.
And Trump's is very small, and it's gotten smaller over the years.
Yes.
And Mr. Trump's failure to flash $100 words should not be automatically equated with linguistic cluelessness. His rally speeches lose nearly all of their coherence, but as live performances, they've often held his audience spellbound.
No,
See Hitler.
No.
He repeats himself over and over as befits somebody who's made a career as a promoter. Remember, he sells snake oil.
Yes.
He's good at that. So, you can't evaluate it on your terms. You have to evaluate it on those terms. That plus using words that everybody knows and uses frequently helps his messages stick.
That could be.
We're going to build a wall. Mexico's going to pay for it. These are simple statements, but people still remember them.
Yeah. They remember, and so they're able to tell, hey, you haven't, and they didn't. But
right. So I think that's all important to remember. Oh, there's a bunch of polls I left out from the weekend. By the way, CBS News looked at the swing states, and found them close. Harris generally leading, but this was interesting for Pennsylvania in particular. Pennsylvania voters see Harris as mainstream and Trump as extreme. I think that's going to be important when it comes time to vote.
Yes.
Kamala Harris, mainstream 54, extreme 46. Donald Trump, mainstream 44, extreme 56. Again, people who decide to vote for Donald Trump know all of this and decide to vote for him anyway for their own reasons, many of which they don't want to tell pollsters. I don't think there's a shy Trump voter, but I do think there's a shy, I'm not voting for her because she's a black woman.
Yeah.
Commentators. And
I will say this. You're correct. You should be shy about that. You should feel bad about it.
Yeah, I'm a racist, so I don't want to tell you. I think that those shy voters still exist.
I prefer when they are ashamed of it.
Right. And then here's another really interesting one that I think on the debate to give you a flavor of what's going on. This one is, and for all our psychiatrist friends out there, this one's for you. How Kamala Harris can beat Trump in the debate, and it has everything to do with Freud. Not fraud.
Okay.
Freud.
Oh, well, I mean, she should mention fraud as well. And I guess all right, I'll be curious to take a look at this. Does this have anything to do with teasing him about how his fingers are short?
There's good reason to be fearful that Harris's recent trajectory will trigger a backlash. Sigmund Freud warned that positive transference, that is to say, when you meet your new therapist and you like them, and you think maybe they're a mother figure or a father figure, you give positive transference. You give them qualities you don't even have. Obama had this. He was a blank slate, the tabula rasa politician who in them you see what you want to see.
Okay.
That's the positive transference thing in politics.
All right.
We've seen it with other folks. You can't have that with Trump now because everybody knows who he is. But in the beginning,
he's gross too.
You could do that. Ronald Reagan certainly had it.
All right.
At the start of therapy, can be short-lived. The same is true. The positive regard follows a political convention. The pendulum, Freud warned, can easily swing back to negative transference, even outright hostility, if the patient's anxieties are brought into awareness without the assurance that the therapist has the goodwill and capacity to see the process through. So in other words, in political terms, if Harris is new and shows up and she's the change agent and people love that and they flock to her because of that, you only have a limited period of time to make your case before people think, oh, well, you got me all excited and now you don't really have anything that's going to do it for me, and so now I hate you.
Oh, well, of course she's working on
but
presenting
the point
that,
is,
so
this election only has 2 months left. There's not enough time for that.
I was wondering if that was where we were going to get to. But the time I found out that I got bored with you, it was December. Well, all right. Too late. Sorry. Okay.
And then this
I don't think that's going to happen. But
whether we admit it or not, all of America has been excited by the fact that Trump has rewritten the rules of debating just as he's rewritten the rules of politics. Thrilled or horrified, we know Trump has made the debates a form of entertainment, part gladiator, part aggression, charisma, impulse, spectacle. All of that matters more than policy, integrity, reason, and information. And it's also part adolescent playground where the bully is king and adults aren't welcome.
Yeah.
So if Harris is to fulfill her mandate to bring
though.
America back to reality, she first and foremost has to find a way to stand apart from the Trump circus. The challenge is simple but difficult. She has to deny Trump the pleasure of his aggression by being immune to his weaponry. She managed this instinctively in the CNN interview. When asked about Trump's racist goading, she said, same old tired playbook, next question. Basically, that was perfect. She's got to do that more in the debate. But managing Trump in his absence is one thing. Ignoring his formidable presence once they're both in the ring will be quite another. She has to use the skills honed as a prosecutor while never giving up the no-nonsense but compassionate maternal archetype she now embodies for the American people. So, interesting look on the optics, if you will, of how this all plays out. It has nothing to do whatsoever with substance, but debates are not about substance. They've never been about substance.
That is certainly true. Why don't I watch them?
It's a spectacle for TV, and you're supposed to come out of it thinking, well, who did I think did a better job? Because feels, vibes.
Yes, and then answer the snap polls.
And the answer to that is, look, you have to stand your ground. You can't look like you're being beaten down by the wave of gish gallop lies that's coming out of it. That's why last week we said one of the suggestions to Harris to say in the beginning, because it's turned off mic, so one person speaks and the other person speaks, where Harris would say, what you're going to hear from my opponent is just a fire hose of lies.
Everything
I'm
that guy
going to be
just
ignoring
said.
that, and I'm going to tell you about what I want to do for the American people.
That would be helpful. And, I wonder if they're practicing what happens if he, wanders over to her part of the stage. And
Exactly.
all that
They're
kind of
doing
stuff.
all of that. I think she's had rehearsals for all of that,
I'm
including
sure.
a full-blown rehearsal with lighting and podiums and stuff like that. Well, Trump basically is being Trump. So, he says, I've had a lifetime of preparing for this. In a sense, he's right, because his style is selling snake oil, and he has had a lifetime of doing it.
I've been lying my ass off for decades.
I don't need to practice that.
Right. That's true. And, and we triggered the lectern bot. There's a bot out there on social media that every time you say podium, it says it's a lectern. So it's then usually quite right. Yeah. Well, I hope she's practicing up, and tomorrow's the date of the event, and you get to come back right after. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. No way for me to wade through all of the things I have, and I'll have to try and figure out a narrative to weave out of this, just like Donald Trump does, brilliantly weaving together various ideas. Lots of things that happened over the weekend that I noted, and there's two main inputs here, one being pocket stories I come across over the weekend and say, that's worth reading in full, or, well, at least I think so when we start. And then social media discourse, not all of which warrants a note. But I mentioned this morning did I? I think so. Anyway, this morning's outrage, I suppose, is the New York Times article, and I did put the article aside, but more commentary about the article has been helpful, including, let's see. So an excerpt from this article, which is titled, here we are, Heritage Foundation Spreads Deceptive Videos About Non-Citizen Voters. That's the headline. You may have seen some of the commentary circulating about it over the last couple of hours. There have been a couple of pretty good ones, including, let's see, did I see the first one that went? I don't know. Maybe I didn't retweet that one, but some very good comments here, just basically about how misleading and deceptive this whole thing really was. And I mean, you can see that even the New York Times will say in the headline that this stuff is deceptive. But let's see, maybe the best thing to do is to go through the discussion and or the article itself already. Here, I think the first notice I took of it was, whose message was this? Aaron Reichlin, Melnick. I'm not even certain who we're talking about. He is the policy director at the American Immigration Council, likely to view Heritage Foundation and Donald Trump programs or proposals unfavorably, but noting that the Heritage Foundation's resident self-titled deportation scientist, and there is no such science, of course, but whatever, that's Mike Howell. And it says here, perhaps more widely known for his rape threats against furry hackers. I didn't really anticipate reading that sentence ever, but there it is. But Mike Howell is the kind of person that you almost can't believe is real. But he is very much a real guy with the resources of a big and powerful organization behind him. So this, a big part of the story of Trump saying, at his convention, handing out signs that said mass deportation now, and of course, admitting over the weekend and repeating, I guess, over the weekend that Trump says, as I see just now coming across the transom of social media again, a headline, this one from the Independent, the UK Independent. Trump says his plan to expel millions of immigrants will be a, quote, bloody story. Likely true. There's just no way to move that many people without bloodshed, most likely. But the commentary on the Heritage Foundation plans for it in particular was interesting. As we said, this Aaron here saying you can hardly believe that this guy is real. Now there's an excerpt which I guess we should just make sure gets read on the air. This is Aaron's view of the most important part, illustrating this point, and then we'll try reading the article so that you can get the full context of it. Asked about research, all right, I guess once again to set this up, this is where he's saying you can hardly believe this Mike Howell guy is real. It's not that he holds views that you have never heard before or that other people don't hold. It's just, I guess it's incredible how you rise to the point where you're a important personage at a think tank, and that the media still treats it as a think tank and you as a serious person when you tell them about your research, and the story goes like this. Asked about research, including Heritage's own data, the Heritage Foundation's own data, showing how rare non-citizen voting is. That's their big threat. There's going to be non-citizens casting votes, and they're going to warp the whole thing, and that's why we're going to have to overthrow the results of this election no matter what, essentially, is their view. So asked about the fact that there's research, including research done by the Heritage Foundation, that shows that non-citizen voting is vanishingly rare, he said, the monumental number of non-citizens that have poured over our borders since 2021 have made any previous, quote, study of non-citizens voting irrelevant. Now, in a July interview on Real America's Voice, a right-wing podcast network, in case you hadn't guessed, Mr. Howell said that out of 40 people, 40, can you believe this? Out of 40 people his investigators spoke to at an apartment complex in Charlotte, North Carolina, 4 out of the 40 said they were both registered to vote and not citizens. Now, of course, you can see why this would upset some people. What if I told you that wasn't true, though? How would you feel about that data then? Right? But he says 4 people told us they were both registered to vote and not citizens. And that led the oversight project that he leads at the Heritage Foundation to conclude that 10% of non-citizens in the entire state of North Carolina were most likely registered to vote. 4 people out of the 40 we talked to told us something that wasn't true. By the way, you'll find that out in the full article. So we said, well, I don't know. We went to an apartment complex in Charlotte. That's probably true of the entire population. And I know that's kind of what polling is, but 40 is not a sample that you would be able to use polling methodology on. And 2, there's a lot more that goes into the methodology of the questioning and question design and the presentation. That also becomes more fully obvious in the full article. Now, again, I'll just read you the rest of this excerpt. Mr. Howell claimed the Biden administration was planning to, quote, refuse a peaceful transition of power by relying on illegal aliens to vote for them. And that's as clear as day. And of course, there's nothing about it that makes anything clear in any way, shape, or form. And by the way, I think it would be a little bit harder to sell the obvious, clear as day unwillingness of Biden to relinquish power, given that he just, relinquished power. But far be it from me to try and find any logic in any of this. But then there were some interesting comments on the comments as well. Including, anyways, I'm going to have to open up a Rolling Stone article and take a look at this one because there's a weird quote from it. That's all I can tell you. Floating by on social media. I don't know what's going on here, but Aswin Subsang has a quote and then a link to the Rolling Stone piece, which is likely his own, along with Tim Dickinson, entitled, What If Trump Wins? And there is the pull quote is effing kill them all. So I'm a little curious about what that's about. Good one for grabbing eyeballs. Well done there. That's when Subsang. Anyway, let's see. There's the comment on the comment on the commentary that we just read. Heritage Foundation's resident self-titled deportation scientist, right? From, oh my goodness, I'm gonna get this pronunciation wrong, although I have seen his name numerous times in writing on social media. Very popular political philosopher at Georgetown University with a name designed to confound me. I'm gonna, let's say, Olufemi O Taiwo. I hope that's in the neighborhood of correct pronunciation, and that's one I might have to go to YouTube and see if he's ever been interviewed somewhere and they practice the name ahead of time. My apologies if I have got it wrong. You probably have seen this name circulating as well, and you're probably glad that you haven't had to pronounce it out loud yet, unless you're a friend of his, in which case you're proud to do so. He was saying, he made the right call on this one, saw this commentary about Mike Howell, one, perhaps being more widely known for rape threats against people he doesn't like, and then coming up with this stupid methodology of let's ask 40 people at an apartment complex and then just say there's 1 billion non-citizens voting. Gonna keep saying bald-faced lying is the sort of thing that a society needs to find a way to effectively penalize if it wants to stick around, as a society. Dave Weigel also commenting on it as well. Including, let's see, is this, how do you like this? This is a parade of fun names that begin with the letter O. In comment on, Professor, I guess, Taiwo's commentary, just read a moment ago. Bald-faced lying is the sort of thing we have to do something about, effectively penalize if we want society to stick around. Osita Nwanevu, my goodness. Osita Nwanevu, whose name I also hope I'm getting right, contributing editor for the New Republic, and whose name also, I think I probably confused the two of them by seeing that O name go by very frequently, but great commenters both, saying one challenge here is that there is a professional norm across most of the American press against calling a lie a lie. Journalists at the New York Times especially have been using increasingly Baroque euphemisms to deal with this. My favorite so far is that someone has revived an inaccurate refrain. That's a pretty good one. And then Dave Weigel, whose name we think we are pronouncing correctly, says that the Heritage Shop, the oversight project that produced this non-citizens say they're registered to vote video, is the same one that put out a June memo arguing that Dems would face serious legal consequences if they replaced Biden. And of course, there were no serious consequences. It was a lie, and you should take this one in stride as well as probably also something of a lie. And it turns out that it is, because even the New York Times essentially says so. How so? In this article, Heritage Foundation spreads deceptive videos about non-citizen voters. The right-wing think tank has been pushing misinformation about voting into social media feeds. The Georgia Secretary of State's office, you know who that is, right? Brad Raffensperger, called one video a stunt. And while that is true, it doesn't feel all that impactful. Oh, he called it a stunt, did he? Well, wait until you see the whole context of this. Ken Bensinger and Richard Fawcett are the writers on this piece. This was from Saturday, the 7th. In July, 2 men went door to door at a sprawling apartment complex in Norcross, Georgia, an Atlanta suburb that is a hub for the region's fast-growing Latino population, asking residents if they were U.S. citizens and whether they were registered to vote. And you know, the non-citizen Latino community loves nothing better than 2 white guys knocking on their door asking after their citizenship status. So you immediately begin to see how things are going to shape up here, just in terms of the questions that they're asking and how they're going to be received. And lo and behold, the reporters, I think, probably accurately reflect that. They do reflect it. I think it's probably accurate. Speaking in Spanish, the folks at home are often peeking from behind half-closed doors. 7 people told the men that they were not citizens, but that they were registered to vote. Now, I don't know whether the 2 men going door to door spoke Spanish. Not sure. Not sure whether they asked people anything in Spanish. They may not have understood any of what was going on. But you can kind of immediately see, peeking from behind half-closed doors, you can see that there's a pretty high likelihood that people are A, intimidated, and B, worried, and C, are thinking maybe it's best to just tell these people whatever it is I think they want to hear so they'll go away, whether these answers are correct or not. Although the 2 men claimed to represent a company helping Latinos navigate the election system, they were actually working with the Heritage Foundation and carrying a hidden camera, which just all by itself, by the way, for someplace that's a quote-unquote serious think tank, why are you hiding that you're working for them? They're serious and well-respected. Why are you telling people you work for someone else? Why a hidden camera? Why do we still think of a place that does hidden camera tricks as a serious think tank? It is now James O'Keefe level BS. Just stop. Right? Well, anyway, okay. Days later, the conservative think tank, in the very next sentence, they say the conservative think tank about these clowns posted a video on the social media platform X, you've heard of it perhaps, containing some of the footage that the men had captured, calling it staggering, quote, staggering evidence that 14% of non-citizens in Georgia, which Heritage said extrapolated to more than 47,000 people, were registered to vote. How many answers did you actually get? A handful, but, if you take the entire number of all non-citizens in the state and say every single person that we asked answered the question accurately and truthfully, and it applies across the board to everybody, even though they're different people in different parts of the state with different histories, then you come to this horrifying conclusion. Based on our findings, the video concluded, the integrity of the 2024 election is in great jeopardy, and that probably deserves dramatic music. Your findings are, highly questionable. And, of course, what you're really after is grounds to say that everything is, the integrity of the election is in jeopardy so that you can challenge the results when you lose. The video, of course, was reposted by Elon Musk, X's owner, who called it, quote, extremely disturbing. It quickly went viral. And, of course, at this point, X, if you feel like calling it that, is an algorithm built to make sure that everything he says is reportable as having gone viral. If no one cares about it, they just, bump up the numbers and say 1 billion people saw it because he demands this. But under scrutiny, those claims do not hold up. You don't say. Now, here's where it all falls apart. 3 of the 7 people that Heritage filmed later said they had misspoken. State investigators. And he does say, you might think, oh, well, how do we know they said they misspoke? I mean, what they said was that they were registered to vote, which would be illegal. And then you said, hey, that's illegal. Oh, yeah, I misspoke. Right? Well, the Heritage Foundation does offer that explanation. So how do you settle something like this? You could investigate yourself. The state could go and find out, all right, what's your name? I saw you on camera. Who are you? And are you registered to vote? And we'll go check our rolls. And if you're registered to vote, 1, we'll deregister you. And 2, you're in trouble. Right? So guess what happened? Well, 3 of the 7 people said they had misspoken. And then state investigators found no evidence. No evidence of what? No evidence that any of the 7 people on the tape had ever registered to vote. Why did they say they did? Mostly to get these people away from their... I thought this was a person that if I said I was registered to vote, if I said I wasn't registered, that they would try to make me sign up. They would try to register me. And I just didn't want to have anything to do with them. So I'm already registered. Go away. We found evidence of a crime. Have you, though? Have you? I mean, it's evidence. It's very poor evidence. Evidence that can be refuted immediately by going to the voting rolls and saying, all right, is this person registered to vote? No. Then did they misspeak? You think they are lying about lying, but the evidence is this. The evidence you have is they said they were registered. The proof of whether or not your evidence is valuable is that they are not registered. And that's the truth of the matter. And yet, there they are. And there's Elon Musk, super genius, saying it's extremely disturbing, when in fact, it's extremely not true. How about that? So, state investigators found no evidence that any of the 7 people on the tape had ever registered to vote. A spokesman for Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, a Republican, called the video a stunt. It was one of several misleading videos that the Heritage Foundation has pumped into social media feeds this year, and yet we still keep calling them a think tank. In fact, watch this. While the once staid think tank, we did say they were once staid. Now they're not staid. It's not that they're not staid, it's that they're not a think tank, guys. But okay. While the once staid think tank has received attention recently for Project 2025, that's one way of putting it, the right-wing blueprint for a future Trump administration that the group funded and wrote and circulated and trained people in how to talk about, it has also made its mark with an aggressive effort to shape public opinion, seeding falsehoods about the integrity of the 2024 election across social media and conservative news outlets, like the Russians might ask you to do, for instance. At the center of that effort is the Oversight Project, an arm of the Heritage Foundation that's all it says, that conducts what it describes, and it's probably lying about it, but what it describes as investigations into immigration policy, among other topics, borrowing from covert tactics used by the group Project Veritas. That's James O'Keefe. Well, it used to be James O'Keefe. He got forced out of there. That's another subject. The Oversight Project has published videos about the supposed threat of migrant voting in shelters on the Texas border, in New York City, and in North Carolina. The project says it's preparing to release investigations of other states, including what its executive director, Mike Howell, the guy who makes rape threats online, recently described in a live stream on X, and we're moving over to X, I guess, as a pretty big thing targeting voter registration at the Virginia Department of Motor Vehicles. We view our role in this cause as breaking the bombshell news, said Mr. Howell. The recording of the live stream appears to have been deleted after the New York Times contacted Heritage for this article, and the Oversight Project has so far posted no videos about alleged non-citizen voting in Virginia. So pretty soon, though, a very short period of time, 2 weeks. You know how that goes. Few groups have done more to propel the false but snowballing theory that non-citizens are preparing to vote in droves in November, threatening the integrity of the election. Few groups, that is, have done as much as the Heritage Foundation. Although, as I was reading this, wanted to go back a paragraph and point out, we're going to have the bombshell news. We're going to show you we have such a bombshell coming about Virginia. This is happening in Virginia in unprecedented numbers. Okay, can you tell us a little bit about that? No, and we delete all references to having said it, as a matter of fact. Put that one up on the wall there right next to, we're preparing to release video from the Arlington National Cemetery incident that will prove that none of this ever happened. Or if it proves anything that it did happen, that it was the other people's fault or something like that. Trump says it never happened. The campaign says we're preparing to release video to show that we're not at fault. And we're going on 3 weeks now since the incident, preparing to release video. In the age of TikTok, in the age of live streaming, we're waiting 3 weeks for a video? I don't think so. Anyway, back to the story. Few groups have done more to, essentially lie about immigration than the Heritage Foundation. Heritage's most recent effort, the Georgia video, tallied more than 56 million views, according to X's statistics, but I don't know if I would trust those or not. Again, hey, Elon said this was very disturbing. We have to, add 25, 30 million views to the tally here so that it looks like other people agree with him about how interesting and disturbing it is. Well, it's also become fodder for discussions on dozens of right-wing news, talk shows and podcasts, as well as on Fox News. The day after it was posted, both Mr. Raffensperger and Georgia's Attorney General Christopher Carr released statements, apparently in response to the video, pledging to investigate specific claims of voter fraud. And I don't know, sometimes that's even a little bit dismaying. Like, really, they're signing back up with the Republican team on this? But as it turns out, they may actually have been going into it saying, I will investigate these things because I know they're not true, and I will then reveal them as not true. Because there is no evidence to support Heritage's findings in Georgia, a critical swing state with a large immigrant population, or for that matter, anywhere else in the country. Isn't that something? Voting by non-citizens is illegal in almost all jurisdictions. Wouldn't you think it was all? Well, hold on a second. Not in a few scattered municipalities that allow residents who are not citizens to vote in local elections. It's up to them. And they decided that can happen. Any non-citizen convicted of trying to vote in a federal election faces stiff fines, prison time, and potential deportation. But you don't have to worry about it because we're not allowed to do that to you in an election year because it could affect the outcome of an election. Oh, we are allowed to do that to you right now and even up to election day and even while you're standing in line trying to vote and then we're wrong and we deport you anyway, even though it was all a lie and you were a citizen the whole time? Oh, okay. Anyway, a study by the Brennan Center for Justice, a policy group you're all surely well familiar with by now, that focuses on voting and criminal justice issues, well, they found that 1/10,000th of 1%, 1/10,000th of 1% of votes in the 2016 election were, in fact, cast by non-citizens. It happens. It's just vanishingly small. The Cato Institute, a libertarian think tank, and I guess everybody's a think tank now. Project Veritas is a think tank. The guys filming the people drinking Folgers crystals is a think tank. The Cato Institute, a libertarian think tank, said that non-citizens don't illegally vote in detectable numbers. The Heritage Foundation. Have you heard of these guys? This is a new introduction to the article. It's called the Heritage Foundation, I believe. Yeah. Well, this place I've never heard of before, the Heritage Foundation, did an analysis that found just 23 documented cases of non-citizen voting across the country. Between 2003 and 2023, a 20-year span, they found 23 actual cases. One a year. I believe they were called, just in case you wanted to look them up, the Heritage Foundation, which sounds familiar. It's very similar to the name of the organization that was just producing studies saying, oh, actually, there are thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of illegal votes going on in this country. And we proved it because we went to a place in Charlotte, North Carolina, and some people tried to get rid of us. Anyway, regardless of the evidence, because why not? Why bother with evidence? Critics say efforts like the Heritage investigation in Georgia could be used anyway by former President Donald J. Trump and his allies to try to discredit the election results if he loses, or even if he wins, for that matter. They may want to discredit it for reasons unknown. The immigrant becomes the boogeyman, said Richard L. Hazen, whose name we hear all the time here because he's an expert on elections law at the UCLA Law School. It provides a means of delegitimizing democratic victories and creates a path for challenging them. And remember, down in Georgia, the Republicans on the elections board have given themselves the power to refuse to certify election results unless it's proven to them that they are definitely really 100% true. And all it really takes is me saying, I heard that people who aren't even citizens voted, so I'm not certifying. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So many other directions that it could be going, but I want to finish with this Heritage Foundation article because it's actually quite important for you to know both how egregiously the Heritage Foundation is lying, why we know that they're lying, and who we really believe on this thing. And as a reminder, that's not a think tank. You can't keep calling a place like that a think tank. It should really be, like we said, against the rules. There should be consequences for these bald-faced lies. And yet it turns out that there are none. Even when, and interestingly, when you've been led down this path before by the same organization, as Dave Weigel pointed out, oh my God, there's going to be big legal repercussions. We're going to be able to stop the nomination of Kamala Harris or anybody else if Biden withdraws. Don't believe it. Don't just write up that they can make this switch. We'll prove it to you. We're lawyers. We know what's going on. Nope. That was just a complete lie meant to freeze you in place in terms of accepting the legitimacy of the handoff. But it was a total lie. They misled you. However, you should totally believe them about this thing, too. And, of course, the New York Times doesn't totally believe them. But they do still give them the window dressing of calling them a think tank when they're an undercover sting operation. That's crazy. No one, the New York Times still, I don't think to this date, they don't call Project Veritas a think tank, do they? No. Anyway, all right. Where were we? We just heard from Richard Hazen, who had said, look, this is being used as a means of delegitimizing democratic victories and creating a path for challenging them. Several election experts derided the Oversight Project's methodology as deeply flawed, and you don't need to be an election expert to do that. Anybody who interviews 40 people and then says, this is the case for some 47,000 people, in fact, is probably, well, they're certainly going to have to justify their methodology with something better than, we knocked on some doors and we asked people the kind of intrusive and frightening questions that they're likely to lie about. And then we extrapolated a thing from that and said it was true. All right. Anyway, so here's where the experts will go deeper into it, right? It's deeply flawed. The group's figures suggest that it spoke to a total of 50 people. As they say here, statistically a tiny sampling. What we would say about that is statistically an insignificant sampling, an unrepresentative sampling from which no conclusions can reliably be drawn. If you draw a conclusion from something like that, you're talking about margin of error of, I don't even know what, 10%? Greater than that, of course, because as it turns out, it's actually a margin of error of about 100%, because every single one of the people that you thought you had something interesting from lied to you, as it turns out. Anyway, several election experts derided the Oversight Project's methodology as deeply flawed. Their sampling was tiny. And then before, not only did they speak to a tiny number of people, they then came to a determination that 1 in 7 non-citizen residents of Georgia may be illegally registered to vote. That is an extraordinary conclusion to even to try to reach, much less actually reach and say it was justified. In an email to the Times last week, Mr. Howell stood by the group's work in Georgia. The quote is, "I am not surprised that when an individual admits to a crime on camera that they would later retract it when that video is made public," he said. And he has a point there. I'm also not surprised by that. But what I am surprised by, although I really shouldn't be surprised about it, is when actual facts on the ground prove that the people who retracted their statements were in fact telling the truth when they retracted their statements, then even then, Heritage stands by the original statements. Like, I'm not surprised that people would lie. Okay, well, why is it that you stake your reputation on the first lie that they told? I don't know, actually. That's a good question. But, I mean, I'm not surprised that when an individual admits to a crime on camera, they would later retract it when that video is made public. Okay, and then you take them to trial and you say, all right, well, I'm not sure. Were you lying the first time or were you lying the second time? Well, I was lying the first time. Oh, can you offer us any evidence to prove that? Yes, I'm not registered to vote. And we can prove that. There are registration rolls, and here they are, and I'm not on them. And not only am I not on them, there is no record of any failed attempt by me to register. So that's the ground truth. I'm sorry, and I understand why Howell wants to try to wiggle out of it, and that he's not surprised that if I admitted to a crime on camera, I would change my mind. That is true. I am also not surprised. I did it for a reason. I don't want to be in trouble. But the bottom line is, if I'm not registered, then the thing you say is useless. That's it. Asked about research, including Heritage's own data showing how rare non-citizen voting is, this is the excerpt we read before, he said, well, no study about the rarity of non-citizen voting is valid anymore because of the many, many immigrants pouring over our borders, which is also, largely not true. At any rate, in a July interview, on Real America's Voice, Howell said that out of the 40 people his investigators spoke to, and could be 50 in Georgia, 40 in North Carolina, 4 said they were registered to vote and not citizens, right? Mr. Howell claimed the Biden administration was then planning to refuse a peaceful transition of power, even though he made a peaceful transition of power between him and Kamala Harris, by relying on illegal aliens to vote for them, and that's as clear as day, except that there's no evidence of it, and when we look for it, we can't find any, so it's really not that clear. In Georgia, Mr. Raffensperger's investigation into Heritage's claims is continuing, even though it's baseless. But all right, we'll keep looking. According to Mike Hassinger, a spokesman for the Secretary of State's office, Mr. Hassinger said investigators had found no records suggesting that people who appeared in the video had registered or voted, and no pending or rejected voter applications from 2024 from the apartment complex. None of the people they spoke to even tried to register. Why did they say they did then? To get the weirdo white people to leave them alone. That's why. The state investigators went to the apartment complex. I'm sure they're so thrilled about having even more people knocking on their door asking these questions. State investigators went to the apartment complex and spoke to two of those interviewed by the Oversight Project. One said she purposely gave the men at her door a fake name and told them what she thought they wanted to hear to get them away. Mr. Hassinger described the Heritage effort as a stunt, adding, "There's no better word for it." There are some, but they would probably require the censoring horn. Anyway, the Times also spoke with a woman interviewed in the video. We did our own investigation. What do you know? The woman, an immigrant from Honduras, who asked that she be identified only by her first name, Marta, because why? She feared being deported. She confirmed to the Times that she was not registered to vote and had never tried to register in the 9 years that she had lived in the United States. She had been surprised to see two strangers appear at her door and feared that if she told them the truth, that she was not registered to vote, they might try to register her. Remember, what did they say they were there for? Did they say, "We're from the Heritage Foundation and we're looking for illegal immigrants who are illegally registered to vote"? Well, that's not me, so you can leave me alone. That would have been one way to deal with it. But they knocked on the door and said, "We're from an organization that you've never heard of, and it is fake, that is trying to help Latinos like yourself navigate the electoral system and become registered to vote." I don't know whether they even said that. But we're helping you, trying to help you navigate the system. I don't want to navigate the system. I don't want anything to do with the system. I'm not entitled to be a part of the system. I don't want to get involved in the system. But we're trying to help you navigate it. Well, I'm already registered. You don't need to help me. Yeah, they would tell him that. I love how now they're like, "We were just trying to get to the bottom of it and find the truth, and they told us a lie." Why would they tell us they were registered? Why would that get rid of us? Because you said you were there to register them. That's why. And she didn't want anything to do with you. She was afraid that they might try to register her, which is a problem for her. I don't want this. And ask her to sign documents, potentially putting her at risk with immigration authorities. So she just said, "I gave it the office. I'm already registered. That's why I'm not signing these things." Well, just sign here. Just sign here. No, I don't want, I don't need you. Marta said that she had no idea she was being filmed. Don't know what the status of that is in North Carolina or Georgia, whichever one she's in. I guess she's from Georgia. Marta said she had no idea she was being filmed until she was shown the online video, and that the two men did not ask her for a full name or address. A sure sign that they're super legitimately trying to register you to vote anyway, by the way. But I just wanted them to go away, she said. The woman was first identified by Lead Stories, a private fact-checking group hired by social media platforms to verify content. Interesting. The group also tracked down two other women who were shown in the video. Both denied having registered to vote. And in fact, the facts bear them out. They didn't register to vote. Isn't that something? On social media, the Oversight Project said it had tried to locate the 7 people on state voter rolls, but was, quote, unable to find them, which means you were wrong. But, we were unable to find them, but that's because of how sneaky they are, you see. Adding that non-citizens have shoddy address history records and often use fake documents and names. So they're still standing by this. Look, these people aren't registered to vote. Well, they could be registered to vote with fake names. Like this name right here could be, Henry Jones. That could be one of these people. We don't know. Founded in 1973, they're giving us background now, Heritage was long known as a policy shop, and it was one, don't get me wrong. It was a terrible one, but it was one for a while. Focused on promoting conservative pro-business policies in Washington. In recent years, it has taken a sharp turn under the leadership of Kevin Roberts, an academic, believe it or not, who said his goal for Heritage was institutionalizing Trumpism. And I'm for the first part of that goal, institutionalizing Trump. It's the ism I don't really care for very much. But yes, in recent years it has taken a sharp turn, not unlike the Republican Party itself, I would say. Mr. Roberts started the Oversight Project just a few months after arriving at Heritage, asking it to provide, quote, aggressive oversight, hence the name, I guess, of the Biden administration, and, quote, institutional support to the conservative movement. That's what they always did. The Oversight Project partnered with an outside group, Muckraker. Great job. But you definitely want to do think tanking and muckraking together in the same place to produce both the Georgia and North Carolina videos. In April, they also teamed up to produce a video about a flyer encouraging migrants to vote for President Biden. Was there such a flyer? We don't know. They said there was. The group said the paper was found in a shelter in Matamoros, Mexico, but the founder of the shelter denied being behind it. She said she had received death threats after the video was posted. So that's a good way to, by the way, if you want people to frighten people out of the business of helping migrants, you drop a leaflet like that, video it, whether or not you drop it in Mexico or not. Drop it on a floor somewhere, video it, say it's in Mexico, give them the phone number of the place you say you found it. Suddenly death threats, and the people who are helping migrants are too afraid to do so from now on. Great tactic. In March, the two groups used a hidden camera to film employees of a migrant aid group, La Jornada, that was providing documentation they said could enable non-citizens to register to vote. The executive director of that organization, which is based in Queens, New York, later said the document they had provided was not identification that could be used to register to vote. Something completely made up, I guess. Anthony Rubin, the founder of Muckraker, in a recent interview on InfoWars, where you go for all the best true info, the conspiracy spreading podcast hosted by Alex Jones, in case you've forgotten, said that anybody who claims this isn't happening, I claim this isn't happening, by the way, but so me, anybody who claims this isn't happening, they're just burying their head in the sand. Oh no. In March of 2022, Mr. Raffensperger announced the results of a statewide audit that determined that 1,634 non-citizens had tried to register to vote among all of Georgia's registered voters at the time. And guess what happened? They were blocked from doing so by existing state verification procedures. He also noted that none of them had cast ballots. Why not? Because they weren't registered. Why weren't they registered? Because they caught them. Because if you're not a citizen and you try to sign up, they check your paperwork and say, no, you can't do it. So my fellow Georgians asked me, are non-citizens voting in Georgia? Mr. Raffensperger said in May on NBC's Meet the Press. I can say, no, they aren't, because we've checked it. So there you go. That's the actual ground truth about what's going on there. And yet, all over America, because weirdos like Elon Musk say it's true and build a whole, they've spent $40 billion buying this system whereby they can order the engineers to say, I want you to tell the New York Times that 56 million people shared my tweet saying that this was extremely disturbing. Did they? I don't know. And you won't be able to find out either. Just wanted to point out that aspect of including anything about Elon Musk in a story like this. I mentioned to you that James O'Keefe was, this whole story, the undercover video was all very reminiscent of James O'Keefe. He's still alive. He's a young man. I don't think anyone was anticipating his death from natural causes anytime soon, although he lives a bit of a dangerous life. So you never know. He puts himself in stupid and dangerous situation. This is the kind of guy that, dies somehow of cholera or tetanus. He's just an unclean person, just all around. But anyway, he's still alive and he's still working in undercover video. In case you were wondering why or how, the answer is here in this piece about his latest work, about which there's no reason to care really whatsoever. It's very weird. And so in a way, it's like, well, here's how he's fallen. He's just no longer a relevant guy. But he's taught people all of these stupid tactics, and they're still using it in relevant ways. But David Roth, a writer whose work you should probably read no matter what he's talking about, just has a fun style and writes for The Defector what's going on with this guy, O'Keefe. And it's great for a reminder of what kind of sleazebag he is. from the past. And it doesn't even include mention of my favorite incident, the old SS dildo incident, in which he decided he was going to, entrap somehow, was it a CNN reporter at the time? A woman reporter that he wanted to embarrass in some way, so he invited her to his houseboat, which, by the way, maybe one of the OG weirdos of the Republican Party, James O'Keefe. Houseboat is just a weird place to live. It just is. It can be quirky weird and it can be creepy weird. And he made it creepy weird. Remember, he invited her over, and the whole idea somehow was, we're going to film her, secret camera, of course. I'll set the whole thing up. But I'm going to fill my whole houseboat with sex toys and dildos. And remember this? Because the plan was, I'm going to fill my whole houseboat with sex toys and dildos and secret cameras. And she's going to come over here. And she's going to come here and she's going to see this. And remember, the plan is, this is going to develop such that she's the one that's going to be held up to ridicule and embarrassment here. I filled my house with dildos and invited her over. She's the one everybody's going to say, shame on you, you hussy. How dare you frequent this establishment filled with dildos, when in fact she goes and she becomes embarrassed and is like, I'm getting the hell out of here. Or I don't know, I think she actually declined the invitation entirely, and he just ended up filling his boat with dildos for no reason. But she's the one that should be embarrassed. Why did you buy all these dildos? And I don't understand you. I think you should be embarrassed. Anyway, that's not even in here. Disgraced conservative media creep gets commander's employee fired with hidden camera videos. And here we're talking about the Washington football team, formerly known as the Washington football team, and formerly known on this program as the Washington Breadsticks, now going as the Washington Commanders. It's a lot less fun to make fun of them now that Dan Snyder has actually sold the team. I really kind of enjoyed it when it was him. But as a Giants fan, I have this to say. I mean, not only that they sold the team, but that they got a Commanders executive fired. I mean, this is reminiscent for me of the news that Dick and Liz Cheney both were endorsing Harris. I was like, I couldn't even really say it was great. It's like great news. Maybe it'll change some minds and some people will want to vote differently or whatever. But if not, I don't care. And it doesn't bother me that I'm voting for the same person as they're voting for. That's just a dumb objection in my view. But I can say, okay. Right. So a similar reaction. You got a Washington Commanders guy fired. Well, on the one hand, James O'Keefe got somebody fired. That's bad, because almost assuredly it was unwarranted. But on the other hand, they work for the Commanders. Okay. I'm not so worried about it. Here's how David Roth describes the incident, the sting, and the guy behind it. Back when the conservative activist James O'Keefe first made his mark in the deceptively edited hidden camera sting video business 15 years ago, he probably did not envision spending his early 40s masterminding an operation that would lead to the firing of a mid-level Washington Commanders employee for some out-of-pocket things, he said, on a pair of secretly recorded dates. O'Keefe is still in that mode. He still thinks that secretly recording romantic encounters, which is, I think, what he thought a boat full of dildos was supposed to be, and it is not. But he loves setting up dates, fake dates, and then, get some attractive woman to agree to wear a wire and a camera and then film it. And by the way, this was a terribly unfair thing to do when they did it to Rudy Giuliani and the Borat video crew dressed up an attractive young woman and sent her to his hotel room to interview him, and he decided this was the time to unzip his pants on the bed. I don't even know if they knew that they were going to get that footage. But anyway, that's deceptive and unfair, but dates are okay. And so who are they trying to entrap in this date? A guy who works in, I think, like the communications department of the Washington Commanders organization. Why? I don't know. Go ahead. Anyway, this is what happened. O'Keefe, one of the more baroquely damaged defectives in reactionary media overall, sorry, I'm ruining his writing style here, is destroying less notable lives now than he did during the years when the videos he produced led to the resignations of NPR executives and the collapse of the activist organization Acorn. But his rancid body of work is compelling proof that the destruction is something like its own reward for him. O'Keefe's taste in enemies has never been especially creative, which reflects both what vintage of conservative he is, that is, vain, pretentious, and relentlessly aggrieved, with strong notes of metro New York City suburbia psychosis on the finish, and the business that he's in. Project Veritas, which O'Keefe built by crafting videos that exposed various conservative culture war enemies in ways built to fit their laziest media caricatures, depending on your preferred pronunciation, was a nonprofit business supported by rich conservatives. Have you heard of this model, by the way? Nonprofit organizations and activists being supported by rich conservatives, or Russians for that matter, the payola scam we were talking about last week, or the new one emerging this week with Leonard Leo from the Federalist Society doing the same thing now that he's rebuilt the Supreme Court in his image. You know all about it. Billions for grifters on the right side and, as they say, pennies for people with conscience on the left. That was actually Maria Cabas had written that up over the weekend. It was a nice turn of phrase, easy to get rich by being an a-hole, pennies for people with a conscience. But unfortunately, that's just a restatement of virtue is its own reward. And it's never been particularly lucrative, but there you go. We've known this for thousands of years, but it's still true. Anyway, this nonprofit that was supported by rich conservatives did this work under O'Keefe, and so generally aimed to scratch the recurring itches of those old, dull, nasty people who were funding it, essentially. Sometimes, as with Acorn, O'Keefe got the results he sought. Mostly, he succeeded in helping people whose politics revolve around being scandalized and upset remain in their desired state of agitation, and in raising money from them to help with his many lawsuits. O'Keefe's grandiosity and vanity eventually destroyed Project Veritas. We know that. That's the fun part of the story. He set that in motion when he appropriated company funds to do whatever was on his mind. So, in case you were wondering, what were some of the dumb things that O'Keefe wasted people's money on that made his staff force him out? He bought DJ equipment. I mean, so what, right? But why? Because O'Keefe dreamed of playing a set at Coachella, according to two former employees. The Washington Post's Will Sommer wrote, and he was then irritated when his staff couldn't get him booked. Like, why would anybody want him to do a set? He wrote off more than $200,000 worth of car service rides and frequent cross-country travel. Why? To visit someone he was dating, who was at the time a cast member of Netflix's Selling the OC. And he paid, with company money, to bus Project Veritas employees down to a production of Oklahoma in Virginia. Why? Because he was playing Curly in that production. So sure, why not? The whole company has to go watch me. O'Keefe finalized the company's death when he huffily martyred himself after being confronted by staffers who felt he had become a power-drunk tyrant. A reminder of what this means. The people at Project Veritas, who got into the political cruelty business for the right reasons and wanted only to do the important work of secretly recording people that they considered enemies and then editing it in ways that would embarrass them, those people were concerned about the extent to which their workplace had become a cult of personality centered around a paranoid and self-glorifying bully. Imagine that. It's tough to excuse any of O'Keefe's behavior here. One employee described him snatching a sandwich out of the hands of an employee in her 8th month of pregnancy. Why? Because he was hungry. Sure, I mean, that is a reason. For cavemen, it's a reason, but, But this may have been an instance in which a familiar, threadbare excuse for executive, we'll say, effery, actually seems to fit. If James O'Keefe was even slightly less of an a-hole, he wouldn't be and never could have become James O'Keefe. At least not the James O'Keefe we know. That's all true. I love the description of it. It was really remarkable. And by the way, in case you were wondering on the way out the door here, we can tell you, so what did he record from the Commander's guy? It's Rael Entine is the guy's name, and he is apparently like a vice president of, does it identify him somewhere in here as a senior VP of content? Content? Isn't football the content? Well, I guess so. He handles their social media and maybe their website and communications. Here's the things that he said. He went on a date, and he apparently was overheard saying that he regards NFL fans as, quote, high school educated alcoholics. What does he think of the players? They're dumb as hell. What does he think of Commissioner Roger Goodell? He's a puppet of Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones, who he says hates gay people and black people. That may even be true of Jerry Jones. I don't know. But those are the egregious crimes for which he's being fired. All right, NFL owners can't really have their senior VPs of anything running around saying stuff like that, I guess. But what's the upshot of having fired this guy? I don't know. They'll get another guy who may even believe the same things. The point is, James O'Keefe has fallen. He was always an a-hole. I wanted you to know just exactly how bad he was, even without resort to the SS Dildo story, which I, of course, myself resorted to. That's the best one I know.
Radio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, so you weren't likely to hear that exact commentary on the news of the day anywhere else, right? So it's still worth coming by and listening to the show. Tomorrow's the debate. We'll prepare for that, I guess, in the run-up to the show, and then the real test on Wednesday when Greg rejoins us to tell us about it. Did I watch? Stay tuned to find out. Justice is next.